My name is Natalie Cooper. I'm 38 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the one holding my family together, the one they leaned on, the one they took for granted. But it all started with one phone call from my younger sister, Harper. Her voice sounded sweet, almost too sweet, like a thin layer of sugar coating something bitter. Beneath that sweetness, I could hear the poison. She wanted me to pay for her lavish Thanksgiving party. Not a small family gathering. No, a huge expensive affair at a fancy lakeside restaurant. All in the name of family, she said. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment, where are you watching from? She didn't hesitate to use every trick in her book, every emotional lever she knew I had. Noah and Grace deserve memories like other kids, Natalie, she started, her voice a carefully constructed blend of whine and demand, a tone she'd perfected since childhood. Don't let them feel miserable just because you're a single mother. My breath caught in my throat, a sharp, painful hitch. Noah and Grace, my children, my whole world. They were right there in the living room, building a lopsided tower of blocks on the worn rug. Their innocent ears, like little sponges, were picking up pieces of the conversation. I saw Noah, my serious little man of 7, look up, his big blue eyes curious. Grace, 5 years old and all vibrant emotion, clutched her worn-out princess doll, Princess Sparkle, a little tighter. The guilt was immediate and suffocating, a familiar cloak Harper loved to wrap around me. Turkey? Noah mumbled, his voice small but clear enough to travel across the room. Grace, never one to be outdone, chimed in, her voice full of breathless hope. And princess dresses, Mama? Will there be princess dresses? My heart didn't just clench. It felt like it was being squeezed by a cold, relentless fist. It always did when it came to them. Harper knew this. She knew my love for them was my greatest strength and my most exploitable weakness. She knew I would walk through fire to protect them, to give them a life filled with joy, even if it meant sacrificing pieces of my own. She knew I'd swallow my pride, my hurt, my bone-deep exhaustion, for the chance to see them smile. It's a lot of money, Harper, I said, turning my back to the children and walking into the small kitchen, trying to keep my voice steady. I leaned against the counter, staring at the small, neat pile of bills waiting for payday. The electric bill, with its stark red past due warning. The notice from Noah's school about the upcoming field trip fee. The credit card statement that I was only managing to pay the minimum on. My job as a paralegal was steady, a blessing I never took for granted, but it wasn't a gold mine. It was a tightrope walk every single month, a careful balancing act between rent, daycare, groceries, and the 100 other small expenses that came with raising 2 children alone. Oh, please, Natalie, she scoffed, a little laugh laced with a familiar, dismissive disdain. Don't be so dramatic. You always have money for your causes. Remember that donation you made to the animal shelter? This is family, Natalie. Your own family. Don't you think Mom and Dad deserve a nice Thanksgiving for once? They've had such a stressful year. Her words were designed to make me feel selfish. The $10 I'd donated to the shelter last month, a small act that had made me feel good, was now being wielded as a weapon. Her mention of our parents was another calculated blow. Their stressful year consisted of a disagreement with their neighbor over a hedge and a canceled trip to Florida. Meanwhile, I was juggling a full-time job, 2 kids, a leaky faucet I couldn't afford to fix, and the crushing loneliness that sometimes crept in late at night. And don't you think I deserve a break? She continued, her voice rising with self-pity. I work so hard planning everything, trying to keep everyone happy. It's exhausting. Harper's version of working hard was a universe away from mine. It involved designing graphics for her small online boutique that rarely turned a profit, and spending hours curating her social media image as a glamorous, carefree lifestyle influencer. My hard work involved bleary-eyed mornings, daycare drop-offs, 8 hours of deciphering legal documents, rushed grocery store trips, homework help, bath time, and collapsing into bed long after my children were asleep. I was the one who always stepped in, who paid the difference on her car insurance, who fixed the family problems no one else wanted to touch. I've already told everyone it's at the Lakeview Lodge, she announced, pressing her advantage, knowing I hated to see anyone publicly embarrassed. The invitations are out. Everyone is so excited. Aunt Carol, Uncle Ben, even Cousin Sarah is flying in from California. It's going to be huge. We're talking a 4-course sit-down dinner, a live jazz trio, a professional photographer. The works? A jazz trio? A photographer? My head spun with the sheer absurdity of it. This wasn't a family dinner. This was a wedding reception. For Thanksgiving. My budget wasn't just screaming in protest. It was waving a white flag of surrender. My common sense screamed louder. This was financial suicide. Harper, that sounds incredibly expensive, I said, my voice strained. It was a last, desperate attempt at reason. Why can't we just do a potluck at Mom and Dad's house? It's cozier and everyone could bring something. The kids love running around in their backyard. No! Her voice sharpened, the sweet veneer cracking to reveal the steel beneath. Absolutely not. We did that last year, and it was a complete disaster. Remember Aunt Carol's green bean casserole? It was inedible, and Uncle Ben spilled red wine on Mom's new beige rug. It needs to be professional, elegant, sophisticated. Then, her voice softened again, returning to its most potent weapon. For the kids, Natalie. Think of the memories they'll have. A beautiful party by the lake. It's for them. She always came back to the kids. Noah and Grace, who had toddled into the kitchen, their block tower forgotten. They stood there, wide-eyed, taking in every word. They didn't understand the nuances of financial strain or the bitter undercurrents of family manipulation. They just heard Thanksgiving, party, lake, and in Grace's case, the unspoken promise of princess dresses. I looked down at their hopeful, upturned faces. How could I say no? How could I tell them that their own aunt, their own family, was using their childhood joy as a bargaining chip? How could I explain that the price of this perfect memory was their mother's peace of mind for the next 6 months? I couldn't, because they would see my refusal not as a stand for my own dignity, but as a denial of their happiness. And that was a burden I couldn't bear. A sigh escaped me, heavy with years of resignation. It was the sound of a battle lost before it had even begun. "Okay, Harper," I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. "Okay, I'll pay for it." A triumphant, almost gleeful smile practically vibrated through the phone line. "Oh, Natalie, you're the best." "I knew you would understand. I'll send you the invoices. This is going to be the best Thanksgiving ever. For the family, for the children." She rattled off a list of things she needed me to transfer money for immediately. The $500 deposit for the venue, the caterer's advance, the booking fee for the jazz trio, even a $200 loan for a new dress for herself. "I can't show up looking shabby, can I?" she'd chirped, as if it were a shared joke. I hung up the phone and felt hollowed out, a shell of a person. The kids, oblivious to the quiet war that had just been fought over their heads, immediately launched into an excited chatter about what they would wear. Grace was already designing her princess dress in the air with her fingers. Noah just wanted to know if there would be extra mashed potatoes and gravy. I forced a smile, promising them everything. I knelt and hugged them tightly, burying my face in their hair, breathing in the scent of them, my two perfect, beautiful reasons for enduring it all. Inside, a familiar ache settled in my chest. This wasn't just about money. It was about my worth. My worth, in the eyes of my family, was directly proportional to what I could provide. My role was to be the silent, smiling benefactor, the one who absorbed the cost, financial and emotional, to maintain their illusion of a perfect, happy family. And for my children, I would continue to play the part. But the resentment, a bitter, cold knot in the pit of my stomach, tightened a little more, pulling just a little closer to its breaking point. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion. I became a machine, powered by caffeine and the fierce, protective love I had for my children. I picked up every extra shift I could at the law firm, staying late to organize case files and prepare discovery documents, my eyes burning from staring at the computer screen under the harsh fluorescent lights. My boss, Mr. Henderson, a kind older man, noticed my fatigue. "Burning the candle at both ends, Natalie?" he asked, placing a cup of coffee on my desk. I just smiled and mumbled something about saving up for a special holiday for the kids. He nodded, satisfied, and the lie tasted like ash in my mouth. When I got home, long after the sun had set, the second part of my day began. After tucking Noah and Grace into bed, reading them stories until their breathing evened out into the soft rhythm of sleep, I'd pull out my laptop. I took on freelance transcription work, typing out endless hours of recorded interviews and focus groups for a marketing company. My fingers would fly across the keyboard, the rhythmic clacking the only sound in the silent house. 1 a.m. became 2 a.m., and the numbers in my bank account slowly, painfully, began to climb back from the precipice Harper had pushed them over. I cut every possible corner in my own life. I ate toast for dinner. I walked the 20 blocks to work instead of taking the bus, saving the fare. I saw a pair of boots in a store window, my own so worn the sole was beginning to peel away, and I walked on, the image of my children's happy faces at Thanksgiving a shield against my own needs. Every dollar saved, every dollar earned was for them. For this one, perfect day. Their excitement was a constant bubbling fountain of joy that both warmed my heart and broke it a little more each day. Noah drew a picture of a turkey wearing a pilgrim hat and taped it to the fridge. Grace insisted on practicing her princess curtsy every evening. The focal point of her excitement was a second-hand princess dress I'd found on an online marketplace. It was a beautiful pale pink, but it had a small tear in the tulle skirt and was missing a few plastic pearls from the bodice. I spent 2 nights, after my freelance work was done, painstakingly mending the tear with thread so fine it was nearly invisible and sewing on new pearls I'd bought from a craft store. As I worked, my own exhaustion faded into the background, replaced by a deep, fulfilling love. I imagined Grace's face when she saw it, repaired and beautiful. This dress, this act of love, felt more real and meaningful than all the money I was pouring into Harper's extravagant party. I tried to keep the lines of communication with my family positive. I texted my mom a picture of the mended dress. Her reply was a single word: nice. I tried to ignore the sting. Harper sent me sporadic, demanding texts. The florist needs another $50 for the centerpieces. Did you pay the photographer's final invoice yet? I paid everything, transferring the money without comment. My savings account dwindling back down to almost nothing. Then, just 3 days before Thanksgiving, it arrived. I had just finished my transcription work for the night. It was almost midnight. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, a rare moment of peace. I felt a flicker of accomplishment. I had done it. I had pulled together the money. The sacrifices would be worth it to see my children's faces light up. An email notification pinged on my laptop. It was from Harper. The subject line was deceptively simple: Thanksgiving plans. I opened it, a small smile on my face. I expected a final confirmation of the time, perhaps a seating chart, or maybe, just maybe, a word of thanks. What I read instead felt like a physical punch to the gut. The air was stolen from my lungs. My chest froze, the warmth from the tea evaporating into an Arctic chill that spread through my entire body. Subject: Thanksgiving plans. Natalie, hope you're doing well. I'm just writing to you about the Thanksgiving party. After much consideration and discussion with Mom and Dad, we've decided it's better if you don't come. Your presence would, unfortunately, ruin the party. Some relatives, as you know, hold traditional values. They don't feel comfortable about you being a single mother. It's nothing personal, of course, but family reputation is very important to us, and we need to present a united, wholesome front. It's a delicate situation, and we just can't risk any awkwardness, especially with the Smiths attending. Noah and Grace are absolutely welcome, though. We've already made arrangements for them to be picked up by Aunt Carol at noon. They can still enjoy the day. We'll make sure they have a wonderful time and get plenty of turkey and dessert. We appreciate your financial contribution to the event. It's truly a blessing to have such a generous sister, and your sacrifice ensures the children will have a perfect day. Thanks for understanding. Harper. My vision blurred. The words swam on the screen, rearranging themselves into new, ever more painful combinations. I blinked, forcing them back into focus, my brain struggling to process the sheer, calculated cruelty of it. I reread the lines, each one a fresh stab of betrayal. It's better if you don't come. The words were so polite, so sterile, as if she were canceling a coffee date, not amputating me from my own family. Your presence would ruin the party, ruin it. Me, the one who had worked herself to the bone to make it happen. My very existence was a liability. Some relatives don't feel comfortable about you being a single mother. This line made my stomach turn. After my husband Mark had left, my family's support had been lukewarm at best. I remembered a comment from my uncle at a barbecue shortly after the divorce. Couldn't keep him happy, huh? He'd said with a smirk. My parents had said nothing, just looked away. Now that shame, which was never mine to carry, was being used as the official reason for my exile. Noah and Grace are absolutely welcome, though. This was the most twisted part. They wanted the products of my life, my beautiful children, scrubbed clean of my disgraceful presence. They wanted to enjoy the happy, well-adjusted kids without acknowledging the single mother who made them that way. We appreciate your financial contribution. The final, brutal twist of the knife. Thank you for the money. Now disappear. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. My hand started to shake, rattling the teacup against the saucer. It wasn't just a simple exclusion. It was a formal indictment. A judgment on my life, my choices, my entire being, my identity as a single mother. The hardest, most honorable, and most fulfilling role I had ever played was deemed a blight on their perfect family image. Tears pricked at my eyes. Hot and stinging, but they didn't fall. A different feeling began to bloom in my chest, an emotion I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't just hurt. It was a cold, hard ember of something else. It was rage. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Harper. I looked at the screen through a watery haze. Did you get my email? Just making sure everything is clear. I stared at the smiley face. A cheerful, yellow circle of absolute damnation. That little icon, so innocuous, so friendly, was a symbol of her complete and utter lack of empathy. She truly believed she was being reasonable, kind even, by allowing my children to attend her party. She felt no guilt, no remorse. The thought made me feel physically ill. I closed the email, then opened it again, rereading each line. Family reputation. United, wholesome front. Delicate situation. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression, sugar-coated judgment, and utter dismissal. My chest still felt frozen, but beneath the ice I could feel the pressure building. Something was starting to crack. A silent, internal tremor that signaled the beginning of an earthquake. I stared at the glowing screen for what felt like an eternity, Harper's smiley face burning itself onto my retina. The cold rage in my chest was warring with a desperate, childish need for my mother. A part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl with a scraped knee, believed that my mom could fix this. She would be horrified. She would call Harper and scold her. She would tell me, "Of course you're coming, darling. Don't be ridiculous. You're our daughter." That was the hope, a fragile, flickering candle in the hurricane of my emotions. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I had to dial her number twice. I rehearsed the words in my head. "Mom, you won't believe what Harper just did. It's horrible. You need to talk to her. I just needed her to be my mother, to stand in my corner, to protect me for once, instead of asking me to be the one who protected everyone else's feelings." She answered on the second ring, her voice infuriatingly cheerful. "Natalie! How are you, dear? I was just thinking about you. Are you excited for Thanksgiving? I bought a new shawl to wear. It's a lovely cashmere." The sheer, breathtaking normalcy of her tone, the blithe assumption that everything was wonderful, was like a douse of gasoline on the embers of my rage. The flickering candle of hope sputtered. "Mom," I started, my voice tight and thin, a stranger's voice. Did you see Harper's email, the one she just sent me about Thanksgiving?" A beat of silence. It was a small pause, but it was long enough for every one of my hopes to die a swift, silent death, then a sigh. It was a long, drawn-out exhalation that spoke volumes. It wasn't a sigh of sympathy, or shock, or even concern for me. It was a sigh of utter exasperation. The sigh a parent gives when a toddler is about to throw a tantrum. It was the sigh of someone who was annoyed at being inconvenienced by my pain. "Yes, Natalie, I saw it," she said, her voice dropping a notch, becoming more guarded, more serious. We discussed it. The two words hung in the air, heavy and damning. They were a confession. This wasn't Harper acting alone. This was a conspiracy. My own mother, my sister. They had held a meeting, weighed the pros and cons, and passed judgment upon me. A united front indeed. Against me. "Discussed what, Mom?" I asked, the tremor in my voice finally breaking free. "That I'm not welcome at Thanksgiving? The Thanksgiving that I am paying every single cent for?" The last words came out as a strangled squeak, and I hated how weak I sounded. Another sigh, this one laced with impatience. "Natalie, don't be so dramatic. It's not about you not being welcome. Of course you're welcome in our family. It's about optics. It's about making the day go smoothly for everyone." Optics? I repeated the word, tasting its bitter corporate foulness in my mouth. My own mother is telling me that my life, my children, that I am bad optics for a family party? I started to pace the small kitchen. The phone clamped to my ear. I felt trapped, like a caged animal. No, darling. You're twisting my words," she said, her tone becoming placating, the one she used when she was trying to manage me. "Harper explained it all very clearly. Some of our relatives, they have certain expectations. You know how important appearances are in our family. And with the Smiths coming, well, it's a wonderful opportunity for Harper's husband. For all of us, really. We need to present a united, wholesome front. You being a single mom, it's just, well, it's not exactly traditional, is it? It raises questions. People might talk. We just want to avoid any unpleasantness. The Smiths, of course. The incredibly wealthy, old money family that Harper had been desperate to impress for years. Mr. Smith was a partner at a big investment firm where Harper's husband, David, worked. This wasn't just a Thanksgiving dinner. It was a high-stakes networking event disguised as a family holiday. And I, Natalie Cooper, the divorced working single mother, was a liability, a smudge on their carefully curated portrait of success and tradition. "So I'm just supposed to accept this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "I'm supposed to drop off my children like a package, be grateful that you're allowing them to attend, and then go home to an empty house on Thanksgiving, all because you're worried about what the Smiths might think of me. Natalie, please don't make a fuss," she pleaded, her voice now tinged with a sharp annoyance. The mask of maternal concern was slipping. "It's one day. You're always so strong. You can handle this, just follow Harper's judgment on this. She has a good head on her shoulders. She knows how to protect the family's reputation. That's your role, darling, to endure, to rise above, for the sake of the family. Think of your children. They'll have a lovely time with their cousins. Don't spoil it for them by making a scene. That's your role, to endure. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. A lifetime of memories flooded me in that instant. Me, at age 10, giving my new bicycle to Harper because she'd thrown a tantrum, my mother whispering, "Just let her have it, Natalie. You're the older one. Endure it." Me, at 16, taking the blame when Harper snuck out and crashed the car. My father telling me, "It's better this way. Her record needs to stay clean." Me, after my divorce, crying on my mother's couch, being told, "Well, marriage is hard work. You have to endure the tough times." Endure. That was always my role. Endure Harper's selfishness. Endure my father's quiet dismissiveness. Endure my mother's constant requests for me to be the strong one, the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble. Endure the loneliness, the sacrifices, the constant giving without ever receiving anything in return. In that moment, everything clicked into place with a horrifying, crystalline clarity. This wasn't just Harper being cruel. This was the family doctrine. It was the foundation upon which my entire life had been built. My mother, with her gentle voice and her complicit silence. My father, with his chronic absence of opinion, which always translated to a silent endorsement of the status quo. They were all complicit. My dignity, my feelings, my years of unwavering support meant absolutely nothing when weighed against their comfort and their ambition. I was a resource, a convenience, a problem solver, but I was not a cherished member of the family unit. I was a function, and when my presence became inconvenient to that function, I was to be hidden away. A coldness settled deep within me, so profound it extinguished the last of my tears. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something harder, sharper. A realization so complete it stole my breath. This wasn't just a single betrayal. It was the final, undeniable confirmation of a lifetime of them. My heart didn't just ache. It felt like it was turning to stone. There was no support coming. No one was riding to my rescue. I was utterly, completely alone. And in that terrifying, desolate moment, I also felt a flicker of something new. A quiet, dangerous power. "Are you there, Natalie?" my mother asked, her voice impatient. "Don't be difficult." I didn't answer. I just looked at the phone in my hand, at the screen that read, "Mom," and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the woman on the other end of the line had forfeited that title. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, like a dam bursting or a scream tearing through the air. It was silent, clean, and absolute, like a single vital wire in a complex machine, stretched taut for years, suddenly giving way with a soft, almost imperceptible ping. For the first time in my life, faced with their casual cruelty, I didn't feel the familiar surge of tears, the choking ache in my throat that usually accompanied their betrayals. Instead, a profound and unnerving calm washed over me, a chilling clarity that felt both terrifying and liberating. I looked at my phone, still displaying my mother's contact information. I didn't hang up with a satisfying slam or a burst of angry words. I just slowly, deliberately, lowered the phone from my ear and pressed the red button, ending the call mid-sentence as she was saying something about not being difficult. The line went dead. The connection was severed, in more ways than one. My children were asleep in their beds, blissfully unaware of the war that had just been declared on their mother. I walked softly down the hallway, the floorboards creaking gently under my feet. I pushed open Noah's door. He was tucked in with his worn dinosaur blanket, his breath a soft whistle in the quiet room. I went to Grace's room next. She was surrounded by a pile of stuffed animals, her face serene in the soft glow of her nightlight. Draped carefully over a chair was the pale pink princess dress, its mended skirt and newly sewn pearls seeming to shimmer in the dim light. Ready for the big day. The big day I was now officially, irrevocably uninvited from. The sight of that dress, a testament to my love and my labor, should have broken me. It should have sent me spiraling into a fresh wave of grief. But it didn't. It solidified the ice in my veins into something resembling a steel spine. I had poured my love, my time, and my scarce resources into that dress, into this entire event, for them. And they, Harper, my mother, my father, intended to take the fruits of my love while casting me aside like the rind. I walked back to the kitchen, the linoleum cool and smooth under my bare feet. The house was utterly silent, save for the low, constant hum of the refrigerator. I stood there, in the center of the room, staring at nothing, letting the silence fill the space where the usual storm of my emotions would rage. But the storm didn't come. There was just that cold, clear, and absolute calm. I picked up my phone again. Not to call anyone, not to plead, not to cry. My fingers, which had been trembling with hurt and rage just minutes before, were now steady. I opened my email app. I found Harper's cruel message, the one that had outlined my shame and my banishment. I read it one more time, letting each word sink in, not for the pain it caused, but for the information it contained. It was no longer an emotional document. It was evidence. My thumbs moved over the keypad. I had a dozen furious, scathing replies typed out in my head. Replies that detailed my years of sacrifice, that called them out on their hypocrisy, that screamed my pain into the digital void. I typed one out, a long paragraph detailing every cent I had spent, every sleepless night. I read it. It felt weak. It was a plea for them to see my worth, and I knew with gut-wrenching certainty that they never would. Pleading was what they expected. An emotional outburst would be dismissed as me being dramatic. It would feed their narrative. I deleted the entire draft. Then I wrote another. Simple, direct, devoid of the emotion they fed on. Subject, Thanksgiving plans. Harper, fine. If I'm not welcome, then you won't be having a party either. Natalie. I hit send. There was no rush of satisfaction, no triumphant glee, just the quiet, decisive click of a boundary being drawn, sharp and final as a razor wire. The transaction was complete. Then I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen illuminated my face in the darkened kitchen, reflecting a newfound resolve in my eyes. I was no longer a victim reacting to pain. I was an agent taking action. I opened a fresh browser tab and began my work. I started by going through my online banking statements, my email confirmations, my entire digital footprint of the past few weeks. Every single transaction related to Harper's lavish Thanksgiving. Every single one. First, the Lakeview Lodge. I found the confirmation email for the event space rental. I navigated to their website, logged into the events portal with the credentials I'd been given. My reservation, paid in full, was still active. I clicked the prominent Cancel Reservation button. A pop-up box appeared asking for a reason for cancellation. I paused for a moment, then typed, change of plans due to unforeseen family circumstances. It wasn't a lie. My family's circumstances had indeed become very, very clear. The cancellation confirmation email popped into my inbox within seconds. One down. Next, the catering company, Elegant Edibles. I located their invoice, marked paid. I called their 24-hour customer service line. A sleepy-sounding man answered. I explained the situation calmly and politely, giving him the reservation number. Yes, ma'am, I see it here. The cancellation policy requires 72 hours notice for a partial refund. I glanced at the clock. It was just past midnight. Thanksgiving was in less than 72 hours. That's fine, I said, my voice even. I don't need the refund. Just cancel the service. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Okay, ma'am. The catering for the Cooper party has been canceled. Two down, then the jazz trio. The photographer, the florist. Each one a separate digital thread to be unraveled. I meticulously tracked them down, sending emails, leaving voicemails, methodically dismantling the entire affair. The money I had paid for deposits, some of it was non-refundable. I didn't care. The cost of my freedom was worth every lost penny. This was no longer about money. This was about reclaiming my dignity, a piece at a time. As I worked, another memory surfaced. A text message from Harper just a few weeks ago. Her car had broken down, the transmission had failed, and she'd been stranded. She had called me, sobbing, hysterical. She'd begged me for money to cover the repairs, promising to pay me back next month. I had, of course, transferred the funds without a second thought. She was my sister. I opened my banking app again, a cold curiosity guiding me. I went to my automatic payments, and there it was. An auto payment set up to repay the car loan she had, for some reason, put in my name years ago when her credit wasn't good enough, and a recurring transfer to cover her phone bill, which was on my family plan, and her premium gym membership, little financial leeches that had been draining me, drop by drop for years. My finger hovered over each one. Disable, cancel, delete. Each click was a deliberate surgical act of disentanglement, a thread being snipped, a weight being lifted. It wasn't just about the Thanksgiving party anymore. It was about dismantling every single piece of her elaborate, lifelong scheme of dependency, every way she had systematically drained me, used me, and taken from me, all under the guise of family. The quiet resolve in the dark kitchen hardened into something unbreakable. I wasn't just canceling a party. I was canceling my role as their perpetual rescuer, their bottomless well of resources, their silent, enduring victim. And in that moment, in the quiet glow of my laptop screen, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Control. The power wasn't in screaming or fighting. It was in the quiet, methodical deletion of my own servitude. By 2 a.m., the adrenaline that had fueled my methodical campaign of cancellations began to wane, leaving a hollow, echoing space behind it. The house was deathly quiet. I was alone with my decisions, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of my own heart. A wave of doubt, cold and sickening, washed over me. It was an old, familiar feeling, the immediate recoil after a moment of self-preservation, the ingrained voice that whispered, "You've gone too far. You've been selfish. You've made a mess." I saw Harper's face in my mind, not the sneering, manipulative sister from the phone, but the little girl with scraped knees who used to follow me around the backyard, her hand clutching mine. For a moment, my resolve wavered, and a sob of pure grief and confusion caught in my throat. Then, I looked at the string of confirmation emails sitting in my inbox, a neat row of digital receipts for my rebellion. Cancelled, cancelled, cancelled. Each one was a small testament to a boundary finally drawn. This wasn't just about a party. This was about a lifetime of being pushed, taken from, and undervalued. They would paint me as the villain. I could already hear the narrative taking shape. Natalie had a breakdown. Natalie is unstable, vindictive, cruel. She ruined Thanksgiving out of jealousy. They would twist the narrative until I was unrecognizable, just as they always had. This time I wouldn't let them. This time I would have the truth in writing. A new purpose settled over me. A cold, clear resolve that chased away the last shadows of doubt and grief. I wasn't done. Canceling the party was the act of defense. Now came the act of preservation. The preservation of my sanity and my truth. I opened a new folder on my desktop. The blinking cursor pulsed in the empty dialog box. I typed its name, evidence. The word felt powerful, legal, final. It was a container, a vessel that would transform my pain from a messy, subjective emotion into a collection of cold, hard facts. My first exhibit was the email from Harper. I saved it as a PDF, its clinical cruelty now preserved. I went through with a digital highlighter, painting the key phrases in a stark, accusatory yellow. "It's better if you don't come. Your presence would ruin the party. We appreciate your financial contribution." Seeing the words, isolated and emphasized, reinforced the calculated nature of her cruelty. It wasn't a fit of pique or a thoughtless comment. It was a premeditated edict of banishment, drafted and approved by a committee of my own family. Next, I began the painstaking process of financial archaeology. I logged into my online banking portal, the screen glowing in the dark kitchen. I started with this year, but a grim, obsessive curiosity pushed me further. I started going back, month by month, then year by year. It started as a search for the party expenses, but it quickly became a deep dive into the last decade of my life, a forensic accounting of my own servitude. I downloaded every statement, every transaction history I could find. The picture that emerged was horrifying. It was so much worse than I had ever allowed myself to believe. There were the big things I remembered, the financial emergencies that always seemed to plague Harper and my parents. The $2,000 for her security deposit on a chic downtown apartment I could never afford. The $1,500 to fix her car's transmission. The $500 for an emergency root canal. But it was the small things, the endless stream of tiny cuts, the death by 1,000 transfers that truly staggered me. I organized them into categories, the paralegal in me taking over, creating order out of the chaos of my life. There was a folder for Harper's lifestyle, $50 here for a girls' night out she couldn't afford, $100 there for a new dress for a wedding, $200 for concert tickets, her cell phone bill, every single month for the last 6 years, a silent drain I had long ago stopped noticing, her premium gym membership, her car insurance premiums. The total was a number so large, so significant, that it made me feel dizzy and physically ill. It was the down payment on a small house. It was a fully funded college fund for my children. It was a life of financial security that I had bled away, one loan at a time, to fund her illusion of a perfect life. With each new discovery, my feelings shifted from a general sense of hurt to a specific, clinical, burning anger. I started cross-referencing the dates of the larger transfers with Harper's social media profiles, which I had muted long ago, but never unfollowed. It was a sickening exercise. The week I had sent her $2,000 for her overdue rent, money I had pulled from my emergency savings, she had posted a series of glossy photos from a weekend spa retreat in the mountains. "Sometimes you just have to unplug and recharge. Self-care blessed," the caption read. The month I had covered her car insurance, she'd posted a photo of a new, expensive-looking leather handbag, captioning it, "Treat yourself. You deserve it." She wasn't just taking from me, she was laughing at me. She was using my responsible, hard-working nature as her personal, interest-free line of credit, all while curating an image of effortless, independent success. I felt like a fool, a complete and utter fool. The shame of it burned hotter than the betrayal itself. I created another subfolder, Parents. It was smaller, but no less damning. The transfers to cover their property taxes, the money for Dad's new set of golf clubs, the funds for their anniversary dinner at a restaurant I couldn't afford. Each transaction was accompanied by a memory of a phone call, my mother's voice a soft, apologetic murmur. I hate to ask, Natalie, but we're in a bit of a bind. Then came the hardest part. My mother's words from our phone call. That's your role, darling, to endure. How could I document a phone call? How could I prove the casual, soul-crushing way she had dismissed my pain and defined my existence? I couldn't record it, but I could write it down. I opened a blank document, the white page glaring at me. I began to type, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I replayed the conversation in my head, again and again, until I could hear her tone, her impatient sighs, the exact, placating phrasing. I wrote down the entire conversation, as best as I could remember it, the dialogue stark and damning. Her initial false cheerfulness, her justifications about optics and the Smiths, her final terrible pronouncement. I typed that sentence and centered it on the page, putting it in bold. That's your role, to endure. I saved the document in the evidence folder. It wasn't a legal document, but it was my testimony. It was the truth of my experience, and placing it alongside the financial statements and Harper's cruel email gave it a weight it hadn't had when it was just a painful, echoing memory. It was my affidavit of the soul. By the time I was finished, the first pale, gray light of dawn was beginning to creep through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The evidence folder on my desktop was now a comprehensive archive of my oppression. It contained dozens of files, PDFs of bank statements, screenshots of manipulative text messages asking for money, Harper's email with its highlighted phrases of dismissal, and my own written testimony. It was no longer just about a ruined Thanksgiving. It was about reclaiming my own story, my own history, my own dignity. I wasn't sure yet what I would do with it. The thought of actually using it, of showing it to anyone, was terrifying. It felt like a nuclear option. But just having it, knowing it was there, was a source of immense quiet power. It was my shield. It was my proof. It was the truth, organized and undeniable. I closed the laptop, the exhaustion finally hitting me like a physical blow. But as I walked to my bedroom to try and steal an hour of sleep before the children woke up, I didn't feel defeated. I felt prepared. The sun was rising on a new day, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. I woke up not to the jarring blare of my alarm clock, but to the sound of soft, conspiratorial giggles coming from the living room. The sun was streaming through the windows, casting long golden rectangles on the floor. For a single blissful moment, I forgot. I forgot the email, the phone call, the cancellations, the folder full of evidence. My first thought was a jolt of pure panic, the kind that had defined my holidays for years. Oh God, we're late. We have to get ready for the party. I need to iron their clothes, pack the bag, make sure we're not the last to arrive. Then, it all came rushing back, not as a wave of pain, but as a quiet, steadying reality. The icy calm from the night before settled over me again. There was no party to rush to. There was no schedule to keep but our own. There was no one to please, no performance to stage. There was only today, here, with them. I pushed myself out of bed and walked into the living room to find Noah and Grace, already dressed, whispering together in a corner. Noah was wearing his new shirt with the cartoon turkey on it. Grace was already in her pale pink princess dress, its mended skirt and pearly bodice looking magnificent in the morning light. She was twirling in front of the television, watching her reflection in the dark screen. "Mama, you're awake," she chirped, her face a picture of pure, uncomplicated excitement. "Is it time to go to the big party yet? Is Aunt Carol coming to get us soon?" My heart gave a painful, predictable throb. This was the moment I had been dreading, the one variable I couldn't control, their disappointment. I walked over and knelt in front of her, smoothing the tulle of her skirt, my fingers tracing the nearly invisible stitches I had so lovingly made. "Hey, sweetie," I said, my voice soft but steady. There was a little change of plans. The big party at the lake got canceled. Her face fell instantly, her lower lip beginning to tremble. Her big bright eyes welled up. "Canceled?" she whispered, the word a tiny tragedy. "But my dress?" "I know, baby," I said, pulling her into a hug. Noah came over, his face serious, and patted her back. "But," I added quickly, before the tears could truly start, "that's okay, because we get to have our own super special secret Thanksgiving party, right here at home. Just the three of us. It's a VIP party." Noah's interest was piqued. "What's VIP?" "It stands for Very Important People," I explained, looking from his serious face to Grace's tear-streaked one. And today it means very important princesses and noble knights only. No grown-ups allowed except for me, and I'm just the cook. Grace considered this, her head tilted. A secret princess party? She asked, a hopeful note creeping back into her voice. The most secret, most special one in the whole world, I confirmed with a solemn nod. And at this party, we get to make our own rules. The first rule of the VIP Thanksgiving party is, we can eat dessert first if we want. That sealed the deal. Grace's tears vanished as if by magic, replaced by a gasp of pure delight. The crisis was averted. The rest of the morning was a study in peaceful, joyful chaos. Instead of rushing around, barking orders to find matching socks and dress shoes, we put on music and made pancakes, adding whipped cream and chocolate chips because it was a VIP party, and those were the rules. We built a giant fort out of couch cushions and blankets, stringing Christmas lights inside to make it magical. We lay inside with a flashlight, reading stories, our voices echoing in our cozy, self-made castle. There was no stress, no underlying tension, no walking on eggshells to appease the volatile moods of my extended family. There was just laughter, genuine and uninhibited. The sound of it filled my small apartment, chasing out the ghosts of last night. Around noon, while I was seasoning a small chicken, our much humbler, but far more meaningful Thanksgiving feast, I allowed myself to imagine the scene at Harper's house. The frantic energy, the performative glamour. Harper, in her new $200 dress, snapping at her husband, David, to fix his tie. My mother, fussing over my father, making sure his suit was perfectly pressed. I could almost hear the strained, high-pitched chatter, the constant low-level anxiety that always hummed beneath the surface of our family gatherings. The thought of it, which once would have filled me with a sense of longing and exclusion, now filled me with nothing but profound relief. We ate our Thanksgiving meal in the middle of the afternoon at our small kitchen table, which we had decorated with construction paper turkeys the kids had made. I had roasted the chicken, made mashed potatoes from scratch, and opened a can of cranberry sauce. Noah and Grace had helped me make a pumpkin pie, a messy but happy endeavor that had left flour on every surface of the kitchen. It wasn't the Lakeview Lodge. There was no jazz trio, no photographer, no obsequious waiters, but as I looked at my children's faces, lit by the afternoon sun, I felt a sense of contentment so profound it almost brought me to tears. Grace had mashed potatoes on her cheek, and Noah was carefully building a wall around his chicken with his green beans. This was real. This was family. It wasn't a performance for the benefit of the Smiths. It was just us. As the afternoon wore on, a strange sense of quiet anticipation began to build in me. I knew what was coming. I glanced at the time on my phone. 3:00 p.m., the time the reservation was supposed to be for. I pictured them pulling up to the lodge in my father's polished sedan, the autumn leaves crunching under the tires. Harper, striding into the lobby like she owned the place, a gracious hostess ready to receive her adoring fans and, more importantly, impress the Smiths, who were probably arriving in their own, much more expensive car. I imagined her approaching the hostess stand, a practiced, charming smile on her face. Reservation for Cooper, party of 20. I could see the hostess, a young woman tapping at her computer screen, the polite confusion on her face. I'm sorry, I don't seem to have a reservation under that name. Harper's smile would tighten, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. It might be under Harrington. For Thanksgiving, it's a large party in the main dining room. More tapping, a furrowed brow. No, ma'am. I don't have any large party reservations for today at all. Our main dining room is closed for a private event. The dawning horror. The frantic whispers between Harper and my mother. My father's bewildered silence. The other patrons in the elegant lobby, turning to stare at the commotion. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, standing by the door, their expressions shifting from polite interest to visible embarrassment. The public nature of the failure, the utter, undeniable humiliation. It was a scene I could play in my head with perfect clarity. Back in my apartment, there was no drama. The VIP party was winding down. We were curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching a movie, the remnants of our pumpkin pie on plates on the coffee table. My children, warm and sleepy, were nestled against me. Grace, still in her princess dress, was already asleep, her head on my lap. Noah was fighting it, his eyelids drooping with each passing minute. The peace in that room was absolute, a tangible thing I could almost hold in my hands. I had chosen this. I had chosen quiet contentment over their chaotic, conditional acceptance. And as I sat there, in the warm, safe cocoon of my home, I knew, without a single shred of doubt, that I had made the right choice. The storm was coming for me, I knew. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The peace was shattered at precisely 5:47 p.m. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a furious, frantic banging on the door, a series of rapid-fire blows that rattled the cheap art on my walls and sent a jolt of alarm through me. The children, whom I had just tucked into bed for an early night, both cried out in fear. A surge of pure, primal, protective anger washed over me. This was my home, my sanctuary, the one place in the world where my children felt safe, and she dared to bring her storm here. I took a deep, steadying breath, the calm from earlier hardening into something more resilient, more formidable. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Harper, just as I knew it would be. But she was a terrifying caricature of her usual self. Her face was a twisted mask of rage, her expensive makeup streaked with tears, creating grotesque patterns on her skin. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, as if she'd been pulling at it in handfuls. Behind her, looking equally furious and deeply flustered, stood her husband David, my mother and my father. My firing squad had arrived. I took a moment to compose myself, then opened the door, but only as far as the security chain would allow. I didn't invite them in. I stood in the small gap, a silent, unmovable sentinel. How could you? Harper shrieked, her voice raw and ragged, a sound I had never heard from her before. She lunged for the door, rattling it against the chain. How could you do this to us? To your own family? You ruined everything! Everything! I have no idea what you're talking about, I said, my voice dangerously calm, almost a monotone. It was a lie, of course, but a necessary one. I would not give her the satisfaction of a confession. I would make her say it. Don't you lie to me, she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. The Lakeview Lodge! The caterer! The photographer! You canceled everything! We were standing there in the lobby in front of everyone. The Smiths saw us. They saw the entire disgusting scene. It was the most humiliating moment of my entire life. Behind her, my mother finally found her voice, though it was trembling with a mixture of anger and self-pity. Natalie, this is not who you are. This is a cruel, vindictive, hateful thing to do. Your father is beside himself. You could have given him a heart attack. My father, as usual, said nothing. He just stood there, his face grim and pale, his silence a resounding vote of agreement with his wife and favored daughter. His silence had always been his weapon of choice, a passive endorsement of their cruelty that allowed him to maintain his own deniability. You disgraced our family, David chimed in, stepping forward, his voice dripping with a condescending venom that was somehow more infuriating than Harper's hysterics. After everything we do for you, after all the support we give you, that was the line. The one that severed the last microscopic thread of familial obligation I might have felt. Everything they do for me, the sheer, mind-bending, gaslighting audacity of it. With a slow, deliberate movement, I unhooked the chain and opened the door wide. It was not an invitation. It was a challenge. Come in, I said, my voice like ice. I stepped back, and they filed into my small, clean living room, bringing the stench of their entitlement and fury with them. They looked around at my humble apartment, at the remnants of my children's blanket fort, at the secondhand furniture, with undisguised contempt. This was the home of a failure, and my failure had just upstaged them. Harper immediately resumed her tirade, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. What is wrong with you? Are you insane? This was for the children. This was for the family. All you think about is yourself. You're a selfish, miserable person, and that's why you're alone. That's why Mark left you. The personal attack, the one they always saved for when they were losing, bounced off the armor I had unknowingly been building all day. I let her scream. I let her exhaust herself, her words washing over me, no longer having the power to cut. They were just noise now, the meaningless tantrum of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. When she finally paused to take a ragged breath, her chest heaving, I spoke. You told me I wasn't welcome, I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through the tense silence of the room. You wrote in an email that my presence would ruin the party, so I did you a favor. I removed my presence. And since my presence, my work, and my money were the only things paying for the party, I removed those as well. It's simple, really. Cause and effect. That's not the same thing, and you know it, my mother cried, her hands fluttering at her chest. You were meant to endure it for the family's sake. You were meant to be the bigger person. There it was again, the family doctrine. I looked at their three faces, contorted with a rage that stemmed not from hurt, but from inconvenience, from their perfect plan being derailed, and I felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. They didn't see me. They only saw a tool that had suddenly refused to function as designed. No, I said, the word clear and final as a judge's gavel. My enduring days are over. As Harper opened her mouth to scream again, I held up a hand. Wait, I said. I turned and walked to the kitchen counter where my laptop sat, already open. It had been waiting all day. I clicked the mouse a single time, waking the screen. "What are you doing now?" David sneered. "Calling the police to cry about how we're harassing you?" "No," I said without looking at him. "I'm just sharing." I looked from Harper to my mother, to my father. I wanted them to see this. I wanted them to understand what was happening. I pulled up the email draft I had prepared hours before. The subject line read, "The Truth About Thanksgiving." Attached was the single potent folder, Evidence. The recipient list was long, a catalog of our entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even a few old family friends. Everyone who had ever been told a story about me, about my life, about my character. I looked at Harper, her eyes wide with a dawning, confused dread. "You were so worried about the family's reputation," I said softly, my voice carrying across the room. "I just want to make sure everyone has the correct information to form their opinions." And then, with one final deliberate click, I hit send. The effect was instantaneous, yet it unfolded in surreal slow motion. A moment of silence, thick with confusion. Then, the first phone buzzed. It was my mother's. She fumbled for it in her purse, her hands shaking. Then David's phone buzzed, a sharp metallic sound. Then Harper's. Harper stared at her screen, her face paling to a ghostly white. I could see the email preview from across the room. She scrolled, her thumb moving frantically, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I watched her face as she saw the attached files. As she realized what I had done, her mouth opened but no sound came out. My mother was reading, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror as she saw her own words. "That's your role, darling, to endure," typed out for the world to see. Then, the messages started. A text notification lit up Harper's screen. It was from our cousin Sarah, the one who had flown in from California. "Harper, what the hell is this? Did you really do this to Natalie? After she paid for my ticket?" Another ping. "Aunt Carol, I am so disappointed in you. Your sister has done nothing but support you for years. Don't call me." Ping, 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 ping. Her phone began to vibrate incessantly, a relentless barrage of judgment from the very people whose opinions she cherished above all else. Her empire of lies, so carefully constructed over years of manipulation and my silent complicity, was collapsing in real time, right here in my living room. The shame she had tried to heap upon me was now flooding back onto her. A tidal wave she could not escape. They had come to my home to disgrace me, to put me in my place. But they were the ones who were being dismantled, piece by the simple, undeniable truth. They left not with a bang, but with a whimper. The furious, self-righteous indignation had evaporated, replaced by a thick, suffocating cloud of shame. My father, for the first time that I could remember, looked directly at me, his eyes holding a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it shame? Confusion? Regret? Before he turned wordlessly and walked out the door. My mother followed, her face pale and slack, refusing to meet my gaze. David grabbed Harper's arm, pulling her toward the exit, his face a mask of cold fury. "You've ruined us," he hissed at her, the words meant for her but loud enough for me to hear. It was the first honest thing he'd said all night. Harper just stumbled after him, her phone still buzzing relentlessly in her hand, a beacon broadcasting her own destruction. The silence they left behind was the most profound peace I had ever known. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood, my legs finally feeling weak. It was over. The war I hadn't even realized I'd been fighting my whole life was finally, definitively over. The fallout was not immediate, but it was total. It was a slow, creeping demolition of the life they had built on a foundation of my sacrifice. I learned about it in pieces over the following weeks and months, through hushed, sympathetic phone calls from Aunt Carol and a few of my cousins who had reached out to offer their support. The evidence email had detonated in the center of our extended family, and the shrapnel hit everyone I had sent it to. There was no ambiguity, no room for them to spin the narrative. The bank statements, the screenshots, Harper's own words. It was all there. Harper's world crumbled first, and it crumbled spectacularly. Her husband, David, whose career ambitions were inextricably linked to his social standing and family connections, could not withstand the public humiliation. The Smiths apparently were appalled by the story and quickly and quietly distanced themselves from him at work. A promotion he had been counting on vanished. Within a month, he had packed his bags and left Harper, filing for divorce. He saw her not as a partner, but as a liability that had cost him dearly. Her carefully curated social media presence imploded. Someone, likely a disgruntled cousin, leaked the story to a local online gossip forum. The tale of the cruel sister and the canceled Thanksgiving became a minor local scandal. Her followers, the audience whose adoration she craved, turned on her, leaving vicious comments calling her a freeloader, a narcissist, and a manipulator. She deleted her accounts, her influencer career vanishing overnight. The car, the one with the loan in my name that I had finally stopped paying for, was repossessed a few weeks later. In the span of a few months, she had lost everything she valued: her husband, her social status, her audience, her car. My parents were not spared. They became social pariahs in their own community. Their friends, many of whom were also related to us or had been for decades, looked at them differently. They were shunned at their church. Their regular dinner invitations dried up. Aunt Carol told me about a particularly painful incident where my mother had tried to defend herself at a family gathering, only to be met with cold silence. They were no longer seen as the respectable heads of a perfect family, but as the cruel, complicit parents who had enabled one daughter's greed and ostracized the other. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, forced to live with the very reputation they had so desperately, and at such great cost to me, tried to protect. As I heard these stories, I waited for the surge of triumphant satisfaction, the glee of seeing my tormentors get what they deserved. I braced myself for a feeling of victory, but it never came. There was a grim sense of validation, a quiet affirmation that I had been right, that the injustice was real and not just in my head. But watching their lives unravel brought me no joy. It was just sad. It was a hollow, empty victory. Seeing Harper, my sister, so completely broken, felt less like justice and more like a tragedy. I realized then that my goal had never been their destruction. My goal had been my own liberation. Their downfall was merely a byproduct of me finally saving myself. This realization was the beginning of a different, more profound kind of healing. It led me to the true meaning of forgiveness. Forgiveness for me was not about reconciliation. It was not about calling my mother and telling her it was okay. It would never be okay. Forgiveness wasn't for them. It was for me. It was the conscious, daily act of letting go of the anger and the bitterness that had taken up residence in my heart for so long. It was choosing to stop carrying the weight of their mistakes, an invisible burden that had been slowing me down my entire life. Forgiveness was distance. It was the quiet, deliberate act of closing a door and choosing not to look back. Not out of spite, but out of a deep and abiding need for peace. And so, I began to build a new life in the wide-open space I had cleared. My world became smaller, but infinitely richer. My focus narrowed to the two little people who had always been my true north. We started new traditions. Small rituals that belonged only to us. Fort Fridays, where we'd eat pizza and watch movies in our blanket fort. Pancake Saturdays, where we'd experiment with new toppings and make a glorious mess in the kitchen. We baked cookies, we went to the park, we read stacks of books from the library. I was no longer just their provider and protector. I was present fully and completely, my mind not occupied by the constant stress and drama of my extended family. I was just their mom. I reconnected with old friends. Women I had drifted away from because I was always too busy putting out fires for my family. We met for coffee and I talked. For the first time, I told the whole truth, and their validation and support were a soothing balm on old wounds. They had seen the dynamic for years, they told me, but hadn't known how to say anything. Their friendship was a gift of reciprocity I had denied myself for too long. I opened a new savings account, a small one at first. I named it Our Future. Every week I deposited a small amount, the money that used to go to Harper's phone bill, to her gym membership, to her endless manufactured emergencies. Watching that balance grow, however slowly, was more satisfying than any lavish party could ever be. It was real. It was mine. It was for us. One evening, about 6 months later, my phone rang. The caller ID read, Mom. My heart lurched with a familiar phantom pain, a ghost of old obligations. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the green button. 1,000 old instincts, honed over 38 years, told me to answer, to be the dutiful daughter, to see what she wanted, to absorb her sadness. But then I looked across the living room, where Noah and Grace were laughing, building a new, much sturdier tower of blocks together. And I knew that my role as a daughter to her, the role of the endless endurer, was over. My role as their mother, as the creator of my own peaceful, loving family, was everything. I pressed the red button, declining the call, and I felt for the first time truly and completely free. Then, final resolution and call to action. That Thanksgiving, I learned the truth. Blood doesn't make family. Respect, kindness, and unwavering support do. I built my own family on a foundation of love, not obligation. My children are thriving, not because of lavish parties, but because they are surrounded by genuine peace and unconditional love every single day. If you've ever been mocked, excluded, or treated as invisible by the very people who should have protected you, remember this. You have the power to draw your own boundaries. You have the right to choose peace. You are the author of your own story. Drop a comment, like this video, and subscribe for more stories of strength and survival.